It happened in the kitchen on a calm Thursday afternoon. I reached for the cabinet's highest shelf on tiptoes to reorganize dishes that hadn't been touched in years. A soft radio station I always listened to for companionship filled the room. The modest chore was one of thousands I did to fill quiet time in my day. Then Maria entered. He was initially unheard. As usual, his steps were quiet and methodical. When I turned to retrieve the next stack of plates, I saw him leaning casually against the counter, arms crossed, a slight smirk tugging at his lips. "Need any help?" he inquired teasingly. "I'm okay," I answered too fast, blushing as I realized how flustered I sounded. He approached and grabbed the glass on the shelf above me. His slow, fluid movement got him so close that I could feel his heat radiating from his body, his slight cologne blending with the earthy warmth of the rain outside. As he handed me the glass, his voice quieted. "Thanks," I whispered, my voice faltering and my breath stopping as his hand touched mine. It seemed like time stopped. Our air changed, carrying something I couldn't describe but couldn't ignore. His gaze looked at me, tightening my chest. He looked at me intently, like he saw something I wasn't ready to see. Breaking the moment, I moved back and hurriedly laid the glass on the counter. I hated how visible my heart was racing. "You've been busy," he remarked, soothingly leaning against the counter. I said, "It keeps me out of trouble," smiling. "Trouble?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as the troublemaking kind." I laughed nervously. "At least no more." He said nothing but watched me with that tiny smirk, his stare steady enough to raise my pulse. Maria had only lived with me for a month, yet he had upended my carefully ordered environment. I spent the first 6 years wallowing in silence after my husband Richard died. The house was too huge and vacant, so I filled it with rituals and distractions like gardening, cooking, and cleaning to avoid thinking. It worked until Maria returned. He called one evening, hesitantly explaining his situation. His tech job in Seattle had fallen through, his lease was up, and he needed a place to stay while he decided what to do. I remembered how he stopped after asking, as if frightened I'd say no. The storm passed the next morning, leaving the world serene. The kitchen window let sunlight illuminate the rain-soaked garden, making everything seem normal. However, when I rinsed my coffee cup in the sink, the night before weighed on me. As usual, my window reflection was familiar. However, the woman staring at me was different. Something gentler. Some uncertainty. Though I didn't regret crossing a line, I couldn't ignore the questions growing in my head. Now what? I didn't hear him enter, but I felt him before turning around. Maria stood with tangled hair and a crumpled t-shirt in the doorway. I allowed myself take him in the morning light because he looked younger and less guarded. "Morning," he whispered carefully. "Morning," I replied, laying the cup down and wiping my hands on a dish towel. Our stillness was weighted with unspoken words. His slow, deliberate steps into the room were like testing the seas. "Did you sleep?" he asked softly. I nodded, although I wasn't sure how much I slept that night. "Did you?" Just a hint of a smile tugged at his lips. After pouring himself a cup of coffee, he leaned against the counter and stared at me. "Are you okay?" The question was simple, yet it was so heavy that my chest tightened. My voice trembled as I said, "I don't know." He nodded as if expecting that response. "That's okay," he whispered. "You needn't figure everything out now." His words were calming and my shoulders relaxed. I started last night but choked on the words. "Genuinely finished for me." He spoke firmly yet gently. I stared up at him, my chest tense with mixed emotions. "Maria, it's complicated." "I know," he said, approaching. "It wasn't fake though." He reached out and lightly touched my counterside hand. As if waiting for me to move away, his touch was delicate and cautious. But I didn't. Instead, I let my fingers curl around his, feeling grounded for the first time in years. I whispered, "I don't know what to do." "You don't need to know," he said gently. "We'll figure things out. Together." A tear fell from my cheek as his words hurt my chest. "It's scary," I muttered. "I know," he replied, tenderly brushing his palm over my hand, "but you don't have to do it alone." We stood in the calm, sunshine flowing through the window, the world outside hardly audible. For the first time in years, I felt tranquility, a fragile optimism that maybe it was okay to let someone in. He broke the stillness by saying, "I'm not asking for anything from you. You should know I'm here. As long as you allow me." He left the room, but his comments lingered as I sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the garden. I persuaded myself I was great alone and didn't need anyone for years. That idea powered my tranquil, safe, but hollow life, which I hadn't acknowledged. However, Maria's statements made me doubt all I thought I knew. Was I able to feel again? Let me be vulnerable? The concept worried me yet gave me a feeling I hadn't had in years. Possibility. I stood up to find the house quiet, the night's weight still covering everything. I didn't know what was ahead or if I was ready. However, as I looked out at the garden and saw the sunlight reflecting off the rain-soaked foliage, I felt a little hope. Maybe it was okay to take a chance and let myself be joyful. He was technically family, so I hadn't. Maria, a tall, gangly youngster with a quick wit and quiet charm, was 16 when I married Richard. We got along well, but he never let me in. Since Richard's death, we grew apart, our occasional phone calls courteous but distant. Now seeing him as an adult, I couldn't reconcile the youngster I remembered with the guy in front of me. He was confident without effort, his sharp features softened by a smile that disarmed everyone he met. Though he rarely showed it, his quiet vulnerability touched me in a way I couldn't understand. Maria broke the silence. "You've been silent today." The observation stunned me and I looked at him. "Have I?" Nodding, he seemed steady. "Got something on your mind?" Unsure what to say, I hesitated. How could I express the mix of emotions he evoked in me, how he appeared to unravel years of carefully guarded solitude with a smile? Finally, I deflected, thinking about how much work needed to be done here. His voice was warm but casual. "Let me help." I thanked him and turned to the cabinet to avoid him. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling that night, I couldn't stop thinking about his gaze at me in the kitchen, his warm voice, and his gentle weight. It was about his representation, not just him. For years I'd told myself I didn't need anyone else and was happy with my life, but Maria made me doubt it. Despite my efforts, something had changed. When I closed my eyes to sleep, his face stayed in my mind, and for the first time in years I felt the faint stirrings of something I thought I'd lost forever. Each day after that felt like going through a maze, with each turn more bewildering. Without being intrusive, Maria was everywhere, making him unavoidable. I would wake up to find him in the kitchen drinking coffee at the table, his hair tangled from sleep and his bare feet tapping lightly on the floor. He always greeted me with a simple smile that lingered after he left. Small things followed. The way he reached for dishes while setting the table, his palm touching mine as if by accident, and the silent times when he caught my eye and held it too long. I said I was imagining things, reading too much into every glance and word. He had unnerved me. Unnamed item. We visited the garden one afternoon. Cooler temps brought early autumn's sharpness. I heard his voice behind me as I carefully pruned the roses. "Help needed?" I turned to see him with his hands in his pockets at the patio edge. He appeared comfortable, but his warm eyes made my pulse race. "Got it," I said hurriedly, pushing a hair from my face. Not listening. Instead, he crouched alongside me and grabbed the pruning shears. He joked, "I'll do the heavy lifting." I handed them over, sighing. "You know you're stubborn?" "Must run in the family," he said, grinning. We worked together in quiet, listening to leaves rustling and birds chirp. Our hands touched when I reached for a fallen rose. The brief contact jolted me, and I hastily snatched my hand back, thinking he hadn't noticed. But he had. His voice was calm yet deliberate as he apologized. "It's okay," I said, returning to the roses. The moment remained, a sense of unsaid connection between us. After dinner, we cleaned up in the kitchen again. Me cleaning and him drying dishes had become a ritual. A modest gesture, but one I valued more than I acknowledged. "You don't have to help," I said, handing him a plate. "I know," he said lightly. "I like being useful." I smiled despite myself, focusing on the warm water on my hands. "You always were." Maybe, he responded, leaning against the counter to dry the plate, "but you bring it out in me." The comment stunned me, and I looked at him. He stared at me without expression. He said, "Don't look surprised," with a timid smile. "You're approachable." I didn't know how to answer, so I scrubbed the sink plate longer than necessary. "I mean it," he said, softening. "Your presence makes this place homey." I tightened my chest as his words hit me more than expected. I told myself for years that my life was plenty. However, hearing his remarks made me realize how much I'd been needing connection, even if I hadn't admitted it. I said thank you finally, voice softer than intended. The next day, our tension increased. Nothing had been said or done to cross borders, but it was there in the way he lingered in the doorway as I read on the couch or the way his hand touched mine in the hall. I said I didn't hear you come in, being too gentle. He said, "The storm woke me up," entering the room. He looked at the matches in my hand and smiled slightly. "You okay?" "Just surprised," I answered, straightening. He reached out to take my matches. As he stroked my hand, it felt strangely intimate. I stopped, the air between us dense with unspoken words. After striking the match, a flash of light illuminated his face, and I was startled by how easily he filled the space. The warm warmth from the candle on the counter formed gentle shadows on the walls. He whispered, "There." I said thanks, but it was hollow. My chest was tight and my thoughts were confused. Leaning against the counter, he remarked, storms like this always change the house. His tone was nonchalant, yet his eyes were steady and watching me. Different how? I inquired, thankful for the break. Eventually, he said, quieter. Like holding breath. I nodded, understanding his meaning more than I wanted to. He didn't move or speak, and the silence was almost terrible. Want tea? Words flew forth as I asked. Sure, he answered, smiling slightly. I worked on the kettle, happy for the chance to separate. I could feel his steady, unwavering attention as I went around the kitchen. I kept our hands separate as I brought him a mug of tea. He quietly thanked me, brushing my fingers. The storm outside raged while we sat at the table with the candle flickering. He reclined back in his chair, thoughtfully holding the mug. He finally responded, "You're silent tonight." I said I was tired, but it was hollow. "You've been saying it a lot recently," he remarked softly but probingly. I didn't know how to answer, so I sipped my tea and felt warm. He whispered, "I worry about you." His severity surprised me, and I looked up at him. "Why?" He answered simply, "You don't let anyone in. You hide everything like you're frightened to show yourself." No words came out when I opened my lips to argue. Deep down, I knew he was right. "You don't have to do that with me," he said, staring at me. "No need to pretend." A knot formed in my throat as his words hurt my chest. "Not that easy," I whispered. "Why not?" he asked steadily. I said I'm terrified, words flowing out before I could stop them. His gaze softened as he nodded. "Yes, but you don't have to." His hand delicately touched mine across the table. Though simple, the gesture made me tremble and catch my breath. My voice faltered as I said, "Maria." He whispered, "It's fine. No need to speak. Please know I'm here. For you. No matter what." His comments lingered and weighed me down. Not sure what I'm doing. Finally, I confessed, shaking. Saying, "You don't have to know." His fingertip lightly touched my back. "Allow yourself to feel it." The rain and thunder outside appeared to fade into the background as my heart pounded. I looked at him really and saw his vulnerability in his eyes and quiet honesty in his voice for the first time. It scared me yet made me feel alive for the first time in years. "Can we just?" I paused, unsure of my request. "Take it one step at a time," he told me, smiling understandingly. I nodded, my chest tense with unnamed feelings. I breathed again when he stood, his hand on mine for a second before turning to depart. His voice was warm and firm as he whispered, "Good night, Marianne." I said good night in a whisper. I stared at the candle's flickering flame as he left the hall. My heart pounded and my thoughts were jumbled. I felt hope for the first time in years. I knew I couldn't flee from this no matter what happened. The morning after the storm was strangely clear. The garden was illuminated by sunshine bursting through the gray clouds and crisp, clear air. The home felt quieter than normal, like it was holding its breath. I spent the morning kneading bread dough in the kitchen. I obsessed on the activity since its cadence was comforting and I needed anything to drown out my thoughts. No matter how hard I tried, I kept thinking about Maria's gaze at me the night before. He looked at me with quiet honesty, spoke warmly, and stroked my hand. He didn't show until nearly noon, but he did so with the same easy assurance that seemed natural to him. He entered the kitchen barefoot, with unkempt hair, a worn t-shirt, and sweatpants. He said morning in a warm, casual voice. I said morning, briskly returning to the counter. He observed me from the doorframe with his arms folded. "You woke early." I avoided his look, saying I had work. "Like you're doing everything," he added with a slight smile, nodding toward the dough on the counter. "You always do." His comment stung, and I faced him with flour-dusted palms. "What does that mean?" "It indicates you overcommit," he replied, his gaze firm. "Always attempting to do everything yourself." "Someone must," I murmured, my voice rougher than meant. Stepping in, he inquired why you always had to be there. Since I had no answer, I pressed my hands into the dough harder than necessary. "You don't have to do it alone," he whispered. I tightened my chest as the words weighed heavy with meaning. I finally said, "I'm used to it. My voice is quieter." He said, "That doesn't imply right." As his words hit me, I stopped, my hand still on the dough. I could feel his warmth now that he was close. When I looked at him, his intense eyes made me gasp. He whispered, "You don't have to do this. Don't keep excluding individuals." The vulnerability in his voice shattered me, and I blurted out the words. I said, nervously, "You don't understand. Can't allow myself." He concluded for me, gently but insistently. My chest tightened with everything I'd held back as I nodded. "You shouldn't be afraid," he added, placing a gentle hand on my arm. I was shaken by the brief contact, and my shields began to disintegrate. We stood silently, our stress thick and unspoken. "I'm not sure how," I said, barely audible. He whispered, "Don't worry about it now. Allow yourself to feel. All I want is that." His comments pulled me into something I wasn't ready for. "Maria." I started, but my voice failed as he approached and clasped my hand. His fingers tenderly stroked my knuckles, saying, "It's okay. Take it slow." The shrill beep of the oven timer broke the silence. I swiftly broke the connection and removed the bread pan from the oven. I looked over my shoulder and saw him there with an unreadable expression. "Thanks," I whispered, unsure what I was thanking him for. He smiled shyly, eyes moist. "Anytime." The tension between us peaked that night. The fireplace's warm glow produced flickering shadows on the walls as we sat in the living room with glasses of wine. Small banter about the weather and his week's plans started, but it didn't last. He broke the quiet by saying, "You've been distant today." "I'm not far," I said, but it seemed empty. A slight smile appeared on his lips as he lifted an eyebrow. "Marianne, you lie badly." I groaned and placed my drink on the sofa table. "There's a lot to take in, I admit." He whispered, "I know," with understanding. Unspoken words filled the air between us for a minute. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, to meet my gaze. "You don't need all the answers, but stop avoiding this," he urged. "This?" I shakily asked. "Simply us," he said. The word hung in the air, making me gasp. "No us," I answered hastily, shaking my head. "Perhaps," he said, his voice steady. I looked aside, my chest tense with unnamed feelings. "Not that easy," I muttered. His hand delicately touched mine, saying, "It doesn't have to be. It must be genuine." Sincerity in his voice and calm intensity in his eyes made me weaken and cry. Maria murmured, "It's okay," softly closing his palm around mine. "This will be resolved collectively." As I laid in bed staring at the ceiling, his words came to me. "This will be resolved collectively." First time in years I wasn't scared. The event occurred late that night. The moment I'd avoided for weeks. The storm seemed to have left a charge in the air. Although the home was silent, my mind kept racing. Again in the kitchen, I leaned against the counter with a glass of water, listening only to the refrigerator's gentle hum. The day was heavy. Too many unspoken words. Too many times our anxiety was too great. Despite my efforts to ignore and suppress it, it kept pressing into my chest every hour. He was initially unheard. His footsteps were barely audible on the wooden floor. I turned and saw him in the doorway, his hair mussed, his countenance unreadable in the faint light. "You're still up," he whispered, breaking the silence. "I couldn't sleep," I said, laying the glass on the counter. The light rain aroma followed him into the room. Despite his modest t-shirt and shorts, he seemed exposed and vulnerable, making my chest constrict. "Me neither," he said, leaning against the counter opposite me. We stood silently for a moment. Despite telling myself to turn away, I couldn't shake his steady gaze. "Why are you awake?" Finally, he asked softly. My fingers tightened on the counter as I paused. "Just many thoughts," I murmured, my voice quieter than intended. "Is it personal?" He asked softly but directly. My breath caught when the question hit me like a wave. I didn't know how to respond or express my confused emotions. "Maria," I started but faltered. "It's okay," he whispered, approaching. "Don't say anything, I simply..." He paused, looking at me, and whispered just above a whisper. "I care about you more than I should, and I won't lie about it." I felt tears at my eyes as his confession hovered in the air. "This is difficult," I shakily said. "I know," he said, "but it doesn't mean it's wrong." I shook my head, my chest tense with conflicting emotions. "Maria, you're my stepson. Not meant to happen." "I'm not your son," he whispered, hard but compassionate. "No, and even if I were, it wouldn't change my feelings about you." A tear fell from my cheek when his words broke me. In a whisper I said, "I don't know what to do." His hand delicately touched my cheek, saying, "You don't have to know." His warm, grounding touch had me lean toward it before I could stop. "It's scary," I muttered, breaking. "I know," he whispered, cupping my face, "but you don't have to be with me." His words made my chest hurt, and I closed the distance before I could think or stop. The kiss was timid and searching at first, but it intensified as he wrapped his arms around me, frightened to let go. His hand slid to the small of my back, pulling me closer, and I melted into him, his warmth clearing away the worry and doubt that had been dragging me down for so long. After pulling apart, our foreheads rested on each other as our breaths mixed in the quiet. He whispered, "Stop." his voice raspy with anguish. If you don't want this, say so and I'll leave. Looking at him, my chest tightened with anxiety and longing. Before I could stop myself, I said, I don't want you to quit. He kissed me again, more confidently, and his hand cradled my face with reverence. As we kissed, we let go of all we'd been holding back. He slowly led me to the couch, giving me every chance to leave. But I didn't. I let myself relax into the moment, him and his hug. His gentle fingertips explored my curves, making me feel loved, wanted, and alive. As the moment threatened to overcome me, I gripped his shoulders fiercely. Are you okay? His soothing voice broke the veil as he inquired. Yes, I whispered, nervous and eager. I surrendered for the first time in years when his lips touched mine again. Not only was there a physical connection, but his intense gaze made my chest hurt. His sweet, reverent whisper of my name made it sound like the most precious thing in the world. In the end, when we lay intertwined on the couch with the candlelight casting gentle shadows on our skin, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, are you okay? He repeated, softening his voice. I believe so, I said, head on his chest. His arms tightened around me as he kissed my head. I said what I meant, he whispered. I'm here as long as you allow. A tear fell from my cheek as his words hurt my chest. I said, this is scary, barely audible. He softly added, I know, but you don't have to do it alone. As the storm faded and the thunder grew distant, I laid in his arms, hearing his heartbeat. For the first time in years I felt calm. Though imperfect, it was sufficient. I needed nothing else for now.